There is a sentence on page 47 of the current Mountain Warfare Sniper Cadre Training Manual, subsection 4.3, titled Adverse Weather Wind Compensation at Extended Range. It reads, when a sustained crosswind shifts to a closing headwind during a terminal adjustment sequence, the observer must discount all prior data and re-establish a clean drift baseline from the most recent 3 rounds, not from the original firing solution. I have cited that sentence in 3 separate official range correction reports over the last 7 years. I've had it half memorized since the first time a student's call went wide because he ignored it. I did not know, until an afternoon at Kesler Alp, who wrote it. Her name was Drell, no relation. Retired Sergeant Major, former battalion sniper section chief, a woman somewhere in her late 50s, with a short gray braid and a civilian fleece that had a small hole burned in the left cuff. She arrived at the range complex the first morning of the NATO Mountain Warfare Validation Block in a white contractor shuttle, carrying a green notebook and a thermos. Lieutenant Colonel Harwick, who was running the block, met her at the vehicle gate. I was standing 6 feet away when he looked at her badge, looked at the shuttle, and said, "Micah, Doctrine Observer, we'll get you squared away." He said it the way you say it to someone who has come to watch and must be kept out of the way. He handed me a yellow observer's vest, the kind we give civilians, journalists, and parents on Family Day, and told me to fit her with it and walk her to the back observation deck. I did it. I clipped the vest over her fleece, pointed her toward the deck stairs, and went back to my pre-block checklist. She thanked me. She did not say anything else. The Kesler Alp range sits at 9,000 feet on a north-facing slope. In June, it is still cold before noon, and the wind off the upper glacier comes in long, uneven pulses that change direction at the ridgeline before they reach the firing positions. It is a range that the manual's own introduction calls among the most technically demanding long-range observation environments in Allied inventory. That sentence is also on page 47. I had read it, taken the point, and moved on without much thought about who had been on that range long enough to write it. The validation block that morning involved 2 4-man sniper teams from a NATO partner battalion working through a progressive fires scenario, 4 observation points, 6 target arrays, adjustments called in relay. The scenario ran clean for the first 90 minutes. Cadet F.O. Bran, the forward observer with 2nd team, went down at the start of the 3rd target array. Heat illness. He was 22, fully hydrated, wearing all his kit in the sun at 9,000 feet, and he simply stopped being functional. He sat down on the line, and his color went wrong, and the senior medic had him on a stretcher inside 4 minutes. The problem was the scenario. Under evaluation protocol, a block in progress cannot be paused and resumed. If it stops, the entire 2-week class loses the validation credit and repeats the final range week. 41 students. Harwick looked at the timeline, looked at the remaining cadre, all committed to observation or safety positions, and pulled out his radio to call the abort. I heard her voice from the observation deck above me, before Harwick keyed his radio. "What does the scenario need?" Harwick looked up. She had come down from the observation deck to the top step of the tower stairs, still wearing the yellow vest. She was holding her green notebook flat against her forearm, open, a pencil in her other hand. Harwick said, "We need a qualified FO to call the final 3 arrays. We don't have one available." She said, "I'm available." There was a pause. I watched Harwick's face run through something. He had been told she was a doctrine observer. He had not read her file. He said, "Ma'am, this is a live fire evaluation block at 2,300 meters minimum engagement distance." She said, "I know what it is." He said, "I can't put an unvetted civilian in a forward observation role on a hot range." She looked at him steadily. "I'm not unvetted, and I'm not a civilian. Pull my contractor credential. The qualification annex is attached." There was another pause. Harwick did not pull the credential. He made a decision based on what he could see in front of him, which was a woman in a yellow vest and a burned fleece holding a green notebook on the tower stairs. He said, "I'm going to have to abort the block." She said, "Your call," and stepped back up toward the deck. Then something happened. One of the cadre, Master Sergeant Volan, a blocky man from the partner battalion who had been running the tower range fan and who had not spoken once in 2 days, said, from the tower, "Sir." Just that. Harwick looked at him. Volan said. I've seen that green notebook before. He did not explain what he meant. He said it the way a man says the thing he is not sure he is supposed to say, but says it anyway, because he thinks the cost of not saying it is higher. Harwick looked at Volan. He looked at the timeline. He looked back up at the observation deck. She was already coming down the stairs. He did not give her permission, exactly. He stepped aside. I think in his mind, he was telling himself he was not authorizing an active FO role for an unvetted observer, that she was simply going to look at the scenario materials and advise, that if something went wrong he had a defensible position. I think he knew, even then, that this was not really what was happening. She walked past him to the forward observation station, unclipped the yellow vest, set it on the sandbag at the corner of the station, and picked up the range card that Bran had left behind. She read it for 12 seconds. She wrote 2 numbers in her green notebook. Then she called for comms check on the net. The net came back clean. The first adjustment was at 2,340 meters. Second target array, a crosswind at 14 knots left to right. She called it in 2 rounds. The first round was 3 meters wide. She called a correction of half-minute right, and the second round landed center. The cadre on the tower did not say anything. I had my clipboard. I was writing down what she called, because my job in the abort scenario had been to document the termination sequence, and now I did not know what my job was, so I wrote down what I heard. I want to be honest about what I was thinking during those first 2 rounds. I was thinking she had gotten lucky. The wind at 2,340 meters is not the hardest part of the Kesler range. The target array sits in a natural wind shadow from the lower ridge, and anyone with solid fundamentals and a good feel for the flags can work a correction there. I had watched cadets do it adequately in training. I wrote down her calls, watched the impacts come back confirmed, and told myself this was the easy part. I think Harwick was thinking something similar. He had his arms crossed at the tower rail, and his posture had not changed from the moment she picked up the range card. He was watching. He was not convinced. The second adjustment was at 2,780 meters. 1 round. She called the wind at 11 knots with a 1-knot decline, asked for a half-minute elevation drop, and the round landed with a half-meter spread. I heard Volan exhale from the tower. Nobody else made a sound. The shadow from the lower ridge does not reach 2,780 meters. That is open air, full glacier wind, and a half-knot read in a declining gust requires a kind of patience with the flags that I have watched range-qualified senior NCOs get wrong. She had called it in the time it takes most people to set up the problem. I stopped telling myself she had gotten lucky. I did not say that to anyone. I kept writing. The third adjustment was at 3,100 meters, and the wind changed. That is the thing about Kesler Alp. The glacier wind that comes off the upper slope does not hold. At 3,100 meters, the crosswind had been running 17 knots for 4 minutes, and then it shifted. Not all at once, but in that stuttering, dishonest way that alpine winds shift, where you think it's holding, and then it isn't, and then it almost is again. I have watched experienced range officers freeze at that moment, waiting for the wind to decide what it was going to do. She did not freeze. She called a hold. She waited 40 seconds, not guessing, not repositioning, just reading the flags at the 2,800-meter stake and the 3,000-meter stake, watching the angle of lean shift and settle. Then she called the correction, and the round landed. The fourth adjustment was at 3,400 meters. The wind had gone to a closing headwind by then, the kind of shift the manual describes on page 47, where everything you have built your firing solution on becomes a different problem. I have seen FOs pull old data at that point. You want to, because you have been building a picture for 20 minutes, and you believe in the picture. She did not pull old data. She went back to 0. She re-established drift from the last 3 rounds, as if the prior adjustments had happened to someone else. The round landed within 1 meter. The fifth was at 3,600 meters. The wind had stabilized to a light direct crosswind, 8 knots, and she split the call between windage and a small elevation hold for the thermal layer that sits above the range at that distance in late afternoon. Thermal layers are in the manual too, a separate subsection. I checked later. She wrote that one as well. The sixth was at 3,900 meters, into a headwind that had dropped from 12 knots to 7 in the span of 4 minutes, in a terminal adjustment sequence that the scenario was not technically supposed to require, because the scenario had been designed around Brand's qualification level, not hers. She called it, in one round. When the final impact was confirmed on the target system, nobody on the tower said anything for about 8 seconds. I counted them. The range at Kesler Alp is not a quiet place. There is always wind and the low creak of the tower and the radio static. But for those 8 seconds I heard none of that. Then Volan said, quietly, "That's Heron Gate." He said it the way you say the name of something you have heard about for a long time but never expected to see. The way a man says a name when the name is the only thing adequate to the situation, and everything else would be noise. He said it to nobody in particular, or maybe to himself, or maybe because he needed to hear it out loud to believe it. I looked at Harwick. He had his hands flat on the tower rail. He was looking at the target display, where the impact confirmation was still lit. His arms had come uncrossed at some point during the 4th adjustment, and he had not put them back. I do not know when exactly that happened. I had stopped watching his posture and started watching the flags. Harwick came down from the tower. He walked across the firing line to the forward observation station. She was standing at the station, annotating the range card in her green notebook, writing down the final adjustment data in small, precise handwriting, because that is what you do when you run a fires sequence. You document it, whether anyone is watching or not. She did not look up when he approached. He reached down to the sandbag and picked up the yellow observer's vest. He folded it. He held the folded vest at his side and rendered a formal salute. She returned it without looking up from the range card. That was it. No speech. No presentation. The block continued. The evaluation was certified. 41 students kept their credit. That evening I opened the training manual to page 47. I had done this before, twice. Both times to pull the citation for a range correction report. I had never read the bottom of the section, where the protocol authorship is logged. It lists the original author, the date of first draft, and the installation where the protocol was field validated. Her name is there. The installation is Kesler Alp. The date is 2009. I had been handing her manual back to her all morning and didn't know it. I still run range blocks at Kesler Alp twice a year, before every block, before the pre-brief, before the safety check, before I hand out a single vest. I open the manual to page 47, and I read the authorship line, her name, the installation, the year. It takes about 4 seconds. Then I close the manual and run the block. I'm not sure exactly what I'm doing when I do it. It isn't ceremony. It isn't tribute. It's closer to the thing you do when you want to make sure you know what you're holding before you decide what it's worth.